Welcome to the Jay Kim Show. This is your host, Jay Kim. I am an investor, author, and fitness entrepreneur, and for the first time in Asia, I sit down with the world's most brilliant minds in business, investing, and entrepreneurship. You'll learn all the secrets, strategies, and formulas to becoming a successful entrepreneur directly from the masters. If this is your first time listening, thank you for stopping by. This podcast is produced every week with the goal of providing actionable insight to you, the listener, with every single episode. And now, on to the show. Today's show guest is Brian D. Evans, who is an Inc. 500 entrepreneur, was named number 7 marketing influencer at Forbes, startup advisor, growth hacker, branding strategist, and the founder and CEO of Influencive. After being turned down by some of the larger publications such as Forbes and Inc. magazine, Brian launched Influencive as a way to showcase himself as a writer. And in just over a year, he's grown this content platform to attracting 1 million readers per month. In today's episode, Brian gives us some key tactics and actionable insights on how to increase your chances of getting featured at larger publications, including how to come up with the best title for your article and exactly how long your post should be. Let's jump right into this episode. Brian, thanks so much for joining us and coming on the Jay Kim Show. We're happy to have you. For our audience who might not have heard of who you are, can you please give us a quick introduction? Who's Brian D. Evans and what do you do for a living?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really appreciate you having me here. So I'm an entrepreneur. I made the Inc. 500 list a couple of years ago of one of the fastest growing advertising agencies in America. I run a motivational platform called Influencive.com, and I've been doing a lot more personal branding lately, have sort of inadvertently stumbled across this combination of brands meeting personal brands. So I'm a writer for a lot of different platforms. I write for Forbes, Inc. magazine, Entrepreneur, Huffington Post, and of course, my own site, Influencive.
Right. Yeah. So Influencive is actually really taking off. I mean, if for our audience listening, if you follow the online marketing or entrepreneurship or pretty much anything online, digital marketing wise, you'll see Influencive pop up as one of the places where a lot of the attention is going to, and so it's quite an impressive feat that you pulled off, Brian. So maybe you could take a step back and give us a little bit of background, sort of how you came up, and if you were, were you a born and bred entrepreneur from the get, like baseball cards, lemonade stands type guy, or did you stumble upon this entrepreneurship somewhere along the way?
No, actually, the story for me started in school. I struggled in school big time. I basically didn't fail, but I just didn't do very well. I wasn't good at school. From the get-go, they took the pencil out of my left hand and put it in my right hand, and everything was backwards for me. So I really struggled in big time in school. So I had to sort of learn how to learn myself because I felt like I wasn't getting it. I was in a very small town. No offense to the school system there, but it was old school. So they were used to teaching for the masses, not teaching individually. So I struggled a lot in school. Basically, video games taught me entrepreneurship. I learned from video games that you can fail and you can lose and then still come back and get up again and give it another go. So I learned that from video games, and I had this mindset of, okay, what can I do? First Fast and the Furious came out. I was into cars. I just got my driver's license at that point, I think, or I was close to it. And I was into that whole world of, import cars and modifying them and things like that. And I realized that people wanted these flamethrower things that came out of the back of the car for the car shows and stuff. So I was like, okay, let me figure out how to make these. So I went to a friend. We figured out how to make them. I started selling them on eBay. They did pretty well. They sold quite a bit for a 16 and a half, 17-year-old kid at the time.
I've always wondered first of all, are they legal?
Well, today, no. I mean, not on the street. Like back then, there weren't specifically laws like necessarily that you couldn't do it. But it was, the pitch was that it was for car shows. Whether people use it for that or not is anybody's guess. But anyway, so they did well. They sold really well. Somebody came to me when I was 18 and a half and said, "Hey, we want to buy your business." And at this point, I didn't see myself as an entrepreneur. So I was like, okay, cool. For me, it's 18 and a half year old at the time that really disliked school. I was like, this is cool. Okay, I'm going to sell it. So I sold the business, not a huge amount, but a good amount for a kid at the time. So then I was like, okay, what else can I do online? I sold these things on eBay. What else is out there? So I
Right.
got into like early SEO and figuring out how to get lots of traffic online. So this is over 12 years ago at this point, when the SEO was like just becoming a thing. It
Right.
wasn't even really, I don't even think it was called that at that point. So I was figuring out how to get traffic online. So I started generating lots of traffic, started putting ads up, making quite a bit of money from ads. But then I said to myself, okay, well, how else can I make money? Someone's making money off me from these ads. So I got into selling other people's stuff, everything from health products to just various physical products. Eventually got into apps that way because I realized that, people they wanted this market, they wanted marketing, they wanted traffic, right? What I learned was how to convert, how to get people to buy things, how to get people to take action on specific things online in addition to getting all this traffic. So, I went down this whole path of I got into apps when they came out. I worked with some of the big games early on and just driving lots of traffic to them. They would pay me every time I got an install. And again, I'd work with the health products. They'd pay me every time I got a sale. And then I
Right.
said to myself, okay, well, someone's making a lot of money off me again. I should, start my own thing. So I started this health company. We sold a whole bunch of white labeled health products online, everything from women's beauty products to weight loss products to men's muscle gain products, just no real brand behind them though, just random names, like nothing anybody's ever heard of, and just selling as much volume as we could, using the psychology of getting people to buy things online.
Right.
But I kind of got bored with all that because I was like, I'm not putting my name behind this. I don't really believe in it. Just some random brand that I came up with last night. It's not like, it wasn't a whole branding thing. And I eventually like had this moment where I was like, okay, well, I want to do something for a bigger purpose rather than just making money.
Right. Was the stuff before that you were doing with the driving traffic, and was that just you yourself, or did you actually work with partners or
Pretty much. I have a partner who's still my partner to this day that we did a lot of the health stuff with and some of the app stuff. But pretty much up until, a few years ago, I was pretty much a one-man show. I would hire like VAs and contractors and things like that to sort of help me do specific tasks. But I never had any employees. And I had a business partner at one point, but most of the time was kind of this like solo journey. And occasionally I'd partner with people on certain specific projects, but mostly kind of a one-man show. And I was always the person that just didn't really like to explain things to other people and kind of slow me down, so to speak. Like my mind worked in weird ways. So I was like, no, I just got to run with it, which is good and bad, right? Sometimes you fail even bigger because you think you're onto something and it's a horrible idea. Other times it works better, right?
Well, it's funny because I think a lot of entrepreneurs suffer with the similar thing, this sort of, quote unquote superhero syndrome or whatever, where you can do the stuff the best. And a lot of times it actually is true, for example, just something as simple as like using a concierge service to book a reservation.
Yeah.
It's like rather than send the email back and forth, it's so much easier for me to just pick up the phone and call the restaurant myself, right? But that's a very simple example of that. But there are times where it's good to outsource, and if you can learn how to let go of some of that stuff, I think it really is helpful.
Yeah, totally. I think it really comes down to an individual level because, like, one example is for me, people always ask me, like, what are your routines? Okay. And, it's weird to say, but like, I don't have, I have a couple routines that I do, but I think it again comes back to the individual basis, like whatever works for you. Like for me, I just love not having a specific routine set because to me, like having the exact same thing on my calendar or doing the exact same thing every day is kind of like torture for me. If I have too many things scheduled, like if I have more than like 4 or 5 meetings scheduled a day, I just freak out. Like it's just I just can't do it. So I'm more spontaneous. And there's many examples of really successful entrepreneurs that are more on the spontaneous side. Like Warren Buffett's an example. Like he doesn't even schedule, I'm not this extreme, but he doesn't even schedule meetings more than like a day in advance. Like he says, if you want to meet with me tomorrow, just call me tomorrow.
Yeah. I get that. I mean, the funny thing is, Brian, is these days, like there's such a focus now on trying to hack everything and streamline and cherry pick tactics from successful people and blah blah blah, and a lot of times that it doesn't scale like that because every person is unique. What works for one person definitely doesn't always work for the next. So you're absolutely right. It's a personal thing, right?
It really is. Yeah. And I tell people that all the time. I think we idolize people, right? We take a look at someone like Tim Ferriss or Tony Robbins and we say, wow, Tony Robbins jumps on trampolines and, does this priming exercise every morning and it's fired up. And, that's cool. Like that works for Tony and like that might work for many other people, but it might not work for you. Right. So,
Right.
I think you really have to and it comes back to like knowing yourself and just seeing how your body and your mind and everything works and just responding to it. I think people are so used to like just taking a system and going with it that they don't actually slow down to be present in that moment and say, is this actually working for me? Like a relationship, right? Like,
Yep.
You can have the hot guy or the hot girl and be like super excited about it. But at the end of the day, like that's only going to last so long, right?
Right.
10 years, 20 years from now, they might not be the hot guy or the hot girl anymore. Who knows, right? So you have to slow down. It's the same thing there. You have to kind of slow down and say, is this the right sort of fit for me after a certain period of time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so after you were doing your sort of health supplements and white labeling, what was the next step? You decided that you wanted to do something a little bit more personal, right, with your name behind it.
Yeah, so there was one more step between that and sort of the personal side of branding for me was I had a whole bunch of people coming to me and saying, "Hey, we want you to do what you just did for us." So that's how I got into starting my agency. But with the agency, what I learned early on was, hey, I can pick projects that I really want to work on. I had been lucky to be relatively successful up to that point. So I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this agency thing, I really want to be able to hand pick clients and projects that I work on. So that was a good warm up because, I was working with a lot of other personal brands and bigger companies and brands that wanted to do like branding and sort of getting their message out there. So I had a lot of warm up before I got into a lot of my own stuff. So I was working with celebrities and just different people. Most of them I can't talk too much about, but just working with a lot of, musicians and actors and just, CEOs and just helping them with their branding, helping them, do writing and getting their personal message out. Because here's the interesting thing. If you look at any of the most successful companies in the world, what do you think of? A person. Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, right? Apple, Steve Jobs,
right?
Microsoft, Bill Gates. So if you look at any of these companies that are still doing really well, and if you think about some of the ones that are not doing well, you don't think of a person. So I realized at one point that, hey, the person and the message and the actual story is not really the company's story. It's kind of the people. Microsoft's story is like the Bill Gates story. Right. Facebook story is like the Mark Zuckerberg story. It's like been made into a movie. Some of the Snapchat even like the guys behind them. So people connect with people. They don't connect with like some mysterious brand at the top of the mountain that's got dark sunglasses on. They connect with people. So that's how I got into sort of doing my own. I realized at one point I said, okay, I'm doing all this stuff for everybody else. I need to do something for myself. So I wanted to be a writer for different platforms. I started submitting content, got rejected. Tried to get into like Forbes and Inc. magazine, Entrepreneur, all those kind of business motivation kind of sites. Just got rejected. So I was like, okay, what else should I do? I had this domain. It was called Influencive.com. I knew I wanted to. I had it for like 5 years. I knew I wanted to do something with it. So I just said, okay, let's use this. I'm going to put a solo author kind of blog. So I started posting content. And after a while, like the first content, honestly, wasn't so good. Like, I got a lot of not negative feedback, but just, super critical feedback of, the ending wasn't so strong, blah, 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 blah. So, but what happened was in time, it got better and better and better. And then at one point, about, a month in, this has been January 2016, about a month in, I started getting requests and said, hey, can we write for the site too? It's I can't believe how awesome it's become, blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay. So I started letting other people write for the site. And then before I knew it, there was like 10 people, 20 people, 30 people, 50 people, 100 people. And all these people wanted to write for the site. And it kind of became like this marketing channel too, because all these writers and people wanted to write. Some of them were really established. And then about 2 or 3 months in, I resubmitted to Inc. magazine. And they were like, yeah, cool. We love what you've been writing, et cetera. So I got to call him on there. So it started all coming together. This is kind of Influencive in my sort of personal branding. I had, people in the industry who knew me, they knew a lot about what I've done, but like in the public sense, nobody really knew much about me.
Right.
But it all started coming together when I started writing on all these platforms because I was sharing my experience combined with like a message of how someone else can go and do that thing. So Influencive really took off that year. I mean, it was largely, I think, due to not just my personal brand, but all the people building their personal brand that were writing for Influencive. Some of them now have, I'm not saying that it's only due to Influencive, but some of them have now become relatively famous, super famous in some cases, and have these huge audiences online. We have writers that reach 20 million people a month.
Wow.
Across their different columns. So before I knew it, I had got my goal of I had got my Forbes column, I had got my Entrepreneur magazine column, I'd got my Inc. and my Huffington Post, and I got all those columns in addition to Influencive taking off. So it kind of all happened at once. I started getting podcast requests. I started, people wanted me to write books with them, and publishing companies started reaching out, asking me to write books, and all these things started to happen and take off at once. So
that's incredible.
Yeah.
So let me ask you something. When you okay, so let's say you probably launched Influencive as your solo author, your own sort of blog website. Yeah. What would you say that was like end of 2015?
It was like end of 2015, early 2016.
Okay, so at that point, how much content were you publishing? I mean, were you writing like every day, every week? Like, what was the cadence of your output?
It was same thing we were talking about earlier. It was pretty random. It was sometimes I'd publish like daily. Other weeks it would be like once a week. I think I went one period where it was like one article in 2 or 3 weeks. So it was pretty random because I was trying to figure out sort of the formula for it, but there really wasn't a formula. It was kind of, there's different schools of thought there. There's the school of thought of, you got to publish tons and tons of content, and some of these sites do publish tons and tons of content. But what happens is, and what the benefit right now, at least for Influencive, is we're only publishing a couple articles a day. So each individual article is getting a lot of traffic and a lot of exposure across social media, across the website, across different platforms, email lists. So as it grows and grows and grows, we'll inevitably have to publish more and more content, but it's kind of at that sweet spot, at least today, of a couple articles a day. But yeah, up until 6 months ago, it was really random. It was like testing all sorts of different wild theories. And really what I've settled on, at least today, is that it's just a couple articles a day is kind of the sweet spot at this point.
Right. And so when you started, let's say when you started having somewhat of a database, so to speak, of published blog posts or articles, was that, at what point were you actively still pitching some of the larger publications like Forbes, Inc. and stuff like that? Or was it kind of, you were just mostly focused on Influencive, and then some of your articles just kind of fell into their laps, so they kind of reverse inquired you?
Yeah, I mean, what happened was it was kind of like a social proof thing. I wanted, Influencive wasn't Influencive then. It was, people didn't see it like that. It was just kind of a smaller site. So I wanted to sort of establish myself and prove that I could be a writer on these other sites still. So I was kind of, still in this like proving myself mindset. So I wanted those other columns to show people that, wow, Brian's writing for this and this site. We should definitely check out Influencive next time we see an article. So it indirectly sort of helped build Influencive because they saw me, at least personally, as, wow, he's writing for Forbes. That's amazing. Then they would look at any article, then what happened was I got this following of people, now in the hundreds of thousands. I have 260,000 people that follow me on Twitter and 100,000 on Instagram and, different platforms. And I've got this whole following of people that just doesn't really matter at this point where I publish something. They just want to see what I'm writing. Right. So, and I'm not saying that's the only reason Influencive is what it is, but that's just one of the contributing factors that helped get it up till that point.
So it was like a virtuous cycle almost, where where people would notice you, and it would drive organic traffic back to Influencive, which was your initial goal anyway. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, pretty cool. So, yeah. And then, so let's say, because I know there's a lot of listeners, and myself included, who would love to publish on not only Influencive, but maybe write a guest post for Forbes or Inc. One of these. I mean, I think that's people want that as social proof. And in your experience, how long sort of does it take once you start trying to publish and you're writing consistently, whether it's on your own blog or on your Medium or your LinkedIn, or maybe you get one or two, larger publications that you pitch and they publish your stuff. because I hear both sides where it's like, you have to write for 3 years and then you'll get your chance, and then when I hear your story, it's like you extremely quickly were able to not only build up Influencive, but also
Yeah.
become quite an authority amongst all the big names. So what would you say is the best, most effective way to streamline that process?
I would say, first of all, everybody's on their own sort of time path. But one thing I want people to really know, don't fall into the trap of saying, yeah, I got to get 100 rejection letters before I'm going to get published, because then that can become like, you can like subconsciously, like, cause yourself to fail by thinking that, I need 100 rejections, or I need to be rejected for 3 years before I'm going to get anywhere. So for me, there's a couple things that I realized that helped me go faster, and I think this is what will help other people as well. So the first tip that I realized, the simplest way to create good content was like, take questions that people commonly ask you, no matter what you're an expert in. It doesn't matter if you're an expert in cameras, Rubik's Cubes, internet marketing, social media, whatever it happens to be. It can be even the most random thing, because you will have other people that want to know about that. Take those questions that they ask you. If you see it more than once, depending on the size of your audience, use that as a basis to write about something. So like, and I literally still use this formula to this day. I'll hear somebody say, well, Brian, how do I get to 100,000 followers on Facebook in 30 days if I really had to do it in 30 days? And I had that question like a number of times, so I wrote an article about it. I said, if you want to get 100,000 followers on Facebook in 30 days, this is how you would do it. And I made an article about that, and it took off, and people wanted to see it. But it came from just people asking me that question. So whatever people ask you commonly, use that as the basis of what you're going to write about. It does help to have a body of work. If you have, what you can do is, if you don't have access to, a platform to write on yet, you can get access to like a Medium. You can write on LinkedIn. Right. You can even write a post on Facebook. You can write a post on Instagram. Instagram is kind of like a blogging platform now. You can put a picture up or something, and then you can leave a long comment that's basically like, look at someone like, an Andy Frisella, or even Gary Vaynerchuk does it too. They leave long sort of captions, rather. That's basically like a blog post. So you can test whatever platform you have access to, and you will have access to something to put that body of work out there. And then as that stuff starts to do well, what you can do is, to help reinforce your pitch to other platforms, you can go to them and say, hey, here's my other articles that are out there. They're doing pretty well. I think if it was on a bigger platform like yours, it would be doing really well. So it's, having that body of work, which everyone can do. I think what people make the mistake of with writing is they try to create this like perfect thing, right? And it's kind of like throwing darts at a wall, honestly. If you think about it like you're going to put out your, it's not writing a book. Okay. Writing articles online is not a book. It's like, you're not spending 2 years of editing to put out this perfectly polished product. That's not a book. It's less polished than that. It's, hey, people ask me this question, I'm going to write about it. You're going to misstep sometimes. Sometimes it's not going to work. You're going to put out articles and they're just not going to get any traction. People aren't going to like it. What people will realize after a while too, is that the headlines and how they see them before they click on them is super important. There's a number of tools that'll help you. There's one called CoSchedule Headline Analyzer. It's free. People can Google that, and it'll give you like a score on your headline. It'll say, oh, you needed more power words, or you need more emotional words.
What did you say it was?
CoSchedule Headline Analyzer. If you Google that, the tool will come up. It's free. You just basically copy and paste your headline in there, and it'll give you a score, and it'll say like, oh, it's pretty low. It's a 50. It's like 0 to 100, I think, is a score. You want to be somewhere over like a 65, but it'll say, you need more emotional words or power words, or, stuff like that.
That's pretty cool. We'll have that linked up.
Yeah. How you frame the content is almost more important than the actual content, because if nobody clicks on it, if nobody sees it, what does it matter that you wrote it, right?
Right. And so what do you think about, then there's the whole, long form versus short form and medium form, and what's the ideal length of an article? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I mean, people have a short attention spans, okay? So if your article is more than 800 words, you need it to be extremely authoritative. You need to quote famous people. You need to have pictures. Yeah, if it's more than 800 words, it needs to be extremely, extremely good. Then you're getting more into the category of like polished work. But for majority of articles, 500 to 800 words is the sweet spot, especially if you're mainly sharing them on social media and things like that. If you have a big built-in audience that wants to read 5,000 words about some super high tech or detailed topic of some kind. If you're an expert in some kind of, camera technology and you want to write a white paper on it, sure, you can do that. But if you want to, reach people in the business or entrepreneur or motivational kind of spaces, it needs to be short and sweet, because people, you have hundreds, thousands of sites and articles competing for their attention. Just reading an article these days, there's pop-ups and things happening to try to distract them and get them away from the article. So what I've seen is the sweet spot is really 500, 800 words or so, and people can read that in, under 10 minutes. More like 5, depending on the person. And the formatting of the articles is also super important. So more so than length, the formatting. So if you put a giant block of text on a screen, nobody's going to read it. So, you need to have subheadlines and, bold, underlined things. Think about it like you're trying to get people down to the next point. So you can have pictures in there sometimes, occasionally. You can have, subheadlines and different things to kind of keep them moving along. If you put a giant block of text, people look at it and go, oh man, that looks like a lot of stuff, even though it's the exact same amount of words. Right. It just looks like more. So it's the formatting as much as it is keeping it relatively short, at least to start. And once you've built a huge audience that wants to, hear about something in more depth, then you can go into bigger articles. Or if you're taking it entirely the SEO approach, where you're trying to get traffic from SEO, longer content could do well. But in terms of actually getting people to read and follow you and stay following you, you want it to be short and sweet.
Nice. Good tips, Brian. Was there one piece that you did that you remember in the first 6 months that you knew what just kind of was the tipping point or the turning point that maybe got picked up by some larger publication or maybe just went viral on Influencive?
Yeah. I wrote an article called Creating the Inevitability of Success Mindset. And I think maybe the headline combined with, it was on Influencive actually. It had like 800,000 reads in 30 days or something like that. So it was still to this day one of my most read articles. And basically the idea was, which is really simple but strong, is that people go through life, they'll say to themselves, I'm going to try to start a business, or I might make a change in my job one day, or I'm going to try to be successful one day. And they'll use all these like conditional statements. Mm-hmm. So what I realized works for me, and I think other people resonated with this, that's why they read it, that's why they shared it so much, was that if you remove those conditional statements, and it's not an ego thing, it's not like you're an egomaniac and you think everything's going to be successful, but when you remove the conditional statements, you believe in yourself more. So every time I say to myself now, I'm going to try to do this, I reframe immediately and say, I'm going to do this.
Right.
And that simple shift for me was a huge turning point in my life, really, of just believing in myself more. So it sort of, going to the title, it sort of helped make your success inevitable because you actually believe in yourself. Right. So that was one of the ideas of the article. And then the other idea is simple. Tony Robbins talks about this a lot. You'll see somebody sitting on a couch, like slumped over behind, a bag of potato chips in front of them, and they're saying, I don't know what's wrong with my life. Huge frown on their face. And Tony would say to them, well, maybe it's your face. And they've got this huge frown on their face. So our physicality is super important. Our posture, how we carry ourselves, even our face. We have like 42 muscles in our face, I think Tony says. And, something as simple as like smiling or standing up straight, or there's one called power posing where you put your hands on your hips like Superman and stand up straight. And it literally changes your body. Like you do that before like some important meeting or something, and you'll just be fired up. So I think people just overlook some of these simple things, but that's I think why that article took off, is because it was just kind of highlighting, short and sweet, but highlighting important things that people overlook.
That's awesome. Yeah. So Brian, we have to look to wrap up soon. Just a couple more questions. So you've made incredible progress in, say, the last 12 to 18 months. What does the next 12 to 18 months look like for you?
Yeah. So, my struggle my struggle with Influencive, the one struggle is that I started it as this project that I was deeply passionate about. And I've always said to myself, I don't want to monetize. I don't want to sell courses and products. And I don't want to make it into this like thing where people see it as like I don't want to turn it into another site where it's just ads all over the place and, buy this course and buy this thing. So my biggest struggle with Influencive was really not monetizing it as heavily as I know I could have. So the next sort of thing for Influencive is we're doing a mastermind group. So so basically taking 20 people that, this is not for everybody. This is for people that have already sort of seen and smelt that success. But there's a contest for people that maybe haven't been that successful yet, or just, haven't, made it on that level yet, it's at influencive.com/contest, and they can win a free spot at this mastermind.
Nice.
By going to that link. So, but yeah, the next thing is sort of, putting together some indirect ways to monetize something that I don't really want to monetize.
Right.
Because I really want to keep it like, as much as I am an entrepreneur, I don't want this to be a business, but I know that I have to make it that. So my goal with Influenza was always just reaching and inspiring as many people as possible. It wasn't to make money with it, but it's become so big at this point. My entrepreneurial mind is like, okay, you got to do something on the monetization side. And it is, I'm not saying it's not making money, but the next phase is to sort of expand out of just articles. And we're getting into video content now. We're doing lots of stuff on Instagram. We have a huge YouTube channel. So it'll be doing other types of content, and then events like this mastermind. We might do bigger events in the future, but to start with, it's the mastermind.
That's awesome. Yeah. Good luck with that. I know you're going to do well. Okay, last two questions. And the last one is just where people can find you. So the second to last question is just one piece of parting advice, given what you've accomplished and how much success you've had. What can you leave our listeners with? Just a snippet maybe that you can leave for them.
I think for most people, and this is simple advice, but most people just overlook this all the time, and it absolutely drives me crazy. Like, my goal in life over the last 10 years has been to make doing a superpower. So doing things, taking steps forward, no matter if it's a small step or a big step forward, has made me successful. Because again, going back to my video game mindset thing that I was talking about earlier, you're going to fail. You're going to take missteps. But if you don't take those steps, if you don't actually start, you're not going to get anywhere. So my advice to people is look at it like a video game. Unless you die, you're getting stronger, you're growing in some way or another, right? So it's okay to fail. It's okay if your business doesn't do well. It's okay if you start something that doesn't do well. It's okay if you write an article and nobody likes it. It's okay. So the most important piece of advice there is think about it like a video game. You can take steps, and if you don't do well, you can start over again.
Awesome advice. Thank you so much for sharing. Where's the best place people can find you and connect with you, other than obviously Influencive?
Yeah. Brian D. Evans on any platform, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Brian D. Evans.
Brian D. Evans. Great. Thanks so much again, Brian. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. All the show notes and links can be found over at jkimshow.com. Come back often and make sure you subscribe, rate, and review. Don't forget to join us next week for another exciting episode of The J. Kim Show. I'd love to hear your comments. You can find me on Twitter at jkimmer, JAYKIMMER. See you guys next week. This podcast is brought to you by Hack Your Fitness, the high achiever's guide to getting ripped in under 3 hours a week. If you're anything like me, you're probably working a full-time job or jobs and trying to find time to balance family life, social life, and last but not least, fitness. Look, I get it. I'm a full-time investor and entrepreneur myself, and father of two. So how am I able to stay fit year-round without spending hours and hours in the gym killing myself on the cardio machine? After struggling for the last 15 years trying every workout and diet under the sun, I finally designed a system that allows me to achieve and maintain single-digit body fat for life in under 3 hours a week. Cardio not required. Head on over to hackyour.fitness and download my free 13-page guide that teaches you the simple science behind efficient fitness and smart nutrition and gives you everything you need to know to finally take control of your life. That's hackyour.fitness.